In the vast expanse of the universe, where stars burn like tiny fires and planets drifted silently in the endless void, there existed a powerful organization known as the Stellar Accord. The Stellar Accord was made up of beings from many different worlds, all working together to keep peace across galaxies. They watched over countless planets, studying their progress and stepping in when necessary to prevent chaos or destruction. But one planet had always been considered too primitive to worry about: Earth. For centuries, Earth seemed insignificant, a small blue dot spinning quietly in its corner of the galaxy. Its inhabitants were busy building cities, fighting wars, and dreaming of reaching the stars, but none of them knew they were being observed. That changed when strange energy signals began emanating from Earth. These signals were unlike anything the Stellar Accord had ever seen before. At first, they thought it might be some natural phenomenon, but further analysis revealed something far more unsettling: rapid technological growth, unpredictable behavior, and signs of instability. If left unchecked, Earth could become a threat, not just to itself, but to the entire galaxy. Fearing what might happen if this unknown force grew stronger, the Stellar Accord decided to send scouts to investigate. Their mission was clear: observe Earth, gather information, and report back within 6 months. To lead this critical task, 3 individuals were chosen for their unique skills and unwavering dedication. The first was Jae-min, a calm and collected strategist. He had spent years leading missions in dangerous territories, earning a reputation for his sharp mind and unshakable focus. Next was Hairi, a brilliant scientist with deep curiosity about life beyond her own world. Her expertise in xenobiology made her invaluable for understanding Earth's complex ecosystem. Finally, there was Dong-suk, whose ability to connect with others set him apart. As the team's communications officer, he could decipher even the most cryptic languages, making him perfect for decoding any messages they might encounter. Equipped with advanced cloaking technology that allowed them to blend seamlessly into human society, the trio landed in Seoul, South Korea. It was a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers, neon lights, and people rushing to and fro. For Jae-min, Hairi, and Dong-suk, it felt both thrilling and overwhelming. Everything moved so quickly here, and yet, amidst the noise and activity, there was an undeniable sense of creativity and resilience. At first, their mission went smoothly. They rented a modest apartment near the heart of the city, using it as their base of operations. Each day, they ventured out to explore different aspects of human life. Jae-min studied military installations and government facilities, noting how humans organize themselves into nations and alliances. Hairi visited parks, markets, and laboratories, fascinated by the diversity of Earth's flora and fauna. Dong-suk immersed himself in conversations, listening to stories shared by strangers on buses and cafes and along crowded streets. Despite their efforts to remain unnoticed, the team couldn't help but marvel at humanity's contradictions. Humans were capable of incredible kindness and devastating cruelty. They built machines that could fly to the moon while also waging wars that destroyed entire cities. Yet, through it all, they kept pushing forward, driven by hope and ambition. However, not everything was as peaceful as it seemed. Strange reports began surfacing worldwide. Scientists disappearing without explanation, remote villages vanishing overnight, and bizarre phenomena reported in areas linked to the mysterious energy readings. Jae-min noticed a pattern emerging. Every incident occurred near places emitting unusually high levels of electromagnetic radiation. Something was clearly wrong, and whatever it wasn't natural. One evening, after returning from a long day of observation, Hairi called the team together. She looked troubled, her brow furrowed as she stared at her tablet. "I've been analyzing those energy signatures," she said, her voice low, "and I found something disturbing." Jae-min leaned forward, his expression serious. "What is it?" Hairi hesitated before answering. "It's not random. There's intelligence behind it. Someone or something is manipulating these signals, and it's getting stronger." Dong-suk frowned. "You think it's aware of us?" "I don't know," Hairi admitted, "but we need to be careful. Whatever it is, it's not friendly." The next few days passed uneasily. The team doubled down on their surveillance, tried to uncover more clues. Then, one night, everything changed. While monitoring a secluded research facility located deep in the mountains, they stumbled upon a group of rogue scientists conducting experiments with forbidden technology. The scientists claimed they were attempting to harness the same energy that had drawn the Stellar Accord's attention. When questioned about the disappearances, they became agitated, urging the scouts to leave immediately. "We didn't mean for this to happen," one of the scientists whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. But now it's awake. Before the team could press for answers, the facility erupted in a blinding flash of light. When the dust cleared, there was no sign of the scientists or any evidence they had ever existed. The incident left Jae-min, Hairi, and Dong-suk shaken. For the first time since arriving on Earth, they realized they weren't alone. Something ancient and intelligent was watching them, and it didn't want to be discovered. As they stood amidst the ruins of the facility, a chilling realization settled over them. Whatever they had awakened, it was only the beginning. The disappearance of the rogue scientists and the destruction of the facility left Jae-min, Hairi, and Dong-suk with more questions than answers. The trio returned to their apartment in Seoul, shaken but determined to uncover the truth. They knew they were dealing with something far beyond human understanding, and the stakes were higher than ever. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder, as if the city itself had become a stage for unseen forces. Hairi spent long hours poring over the data she had collected from the facility. Her fingers danced across her tablet screen, analyzing patterns in the electromagnetic signals. She was driven by a mix of fear and fascination. Something about the energy readings called to her, whispering secrets she couldn't quite grasp. It wasn't just random noise, it was a language, fragmented and chaotic, yet undeniably intelligent. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a great discovery, but the closer she got, the more uneasy she became. One night, while the others slept, Hairi sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her tablet. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic outside. Suddenly, her screen flickered. Lines of text appeared, written in an unfamiliar script that seemed to twist and writhe before her eyes. At first, she thought it was a glitch, but then she realized this wasn't part of her analysis. It was a message. Dong-suk woke up to find Hairi still sitting there, her face pale and her hands trembling. "What's wrong?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I think it's trying to communicate," Hairi stammered, pointing at the tablet. "It knows we're here." Dong-suk frowned as he studied the strange symbols. As the team's linguist, decoding languages was his specialty, but this was unlike anything he'd encountered before. The characters didn't belong to any known system. They seemed alive, pulsing with eerie energy. He tried to focus, ignoring the growing sense of unease in his chest. Slowly, painstakingly, he began translating. The message spoke of an entity referred to only as the Whisperer. According to fragmented text, the Whisperer was ancient, older than stars or galaxies. It had been imprisoned eons ago by a civilization now lost to time, sealed away in a dimension between worlds. But its prison was weakening, and it was reaching out, feeding on fear and knowledge to regain its strength. The final line sent chills down Dong-suk's spine. "Do not listen. Do not look, or it will take you too." When Jae-min joined them the next morning, he listened intently as Dong-suk explained what they had found. His usual calm demeanor faltered slightly, but he quickly masked it with determination. "If this thing is real, we need to figure out how to stop it," he said firmly, "and fast." But stopping the Whisperer proved easier said than done. Strange occurrences began plaguing the team almost immediately. Hairi started hearing faint whispers whenever she worked late into the night. At first, she thought it was just fatigue playing tricks on her mind, but the voices grew louder, clearer. They spoke in tones both soothing and menacing, promising her power and wisdom if she would only surrender to them. Dong-suk, meanwhile, found himself haunted by vivid dreams. In these dreams, he wandered through dark forests where shadowy figures reached out to him, their faces obscured by veils of smoke. They whispered his name, urging him to join them. When he woke, he often felt disoriented, unsure whether he had truly been asleep or trapped in some nightmare realm. The boundary between reality and illusion blurred more each day. Even Jae-min, who prided himself on his rationality, couldn't escape the creeping sense of dread. He noticed shadows moving where no light should fall, heard footsteps echoing in empty hallways. Once, while walking through a crowded market, he turned to see a figure standing behind him. A tall, gaunt being with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched impossibly wide. But when he blinked, it vanished, leaving him questioning his own sanity. Despite their growing fears, the team pressed on. They decided to investigate areas where the strange energy readings were strongest, hoping to find clues about the Whisperer's origins. Their search led them to Mount Baekdu, a remote volcanic peak straddling the border between North Korea and China. Legend spoke of a spirit dwelling within the mountain, a being that devoured souls and granted dark wishes to those brave or foolish enough to seek it out. As they ascended the rugged slopes, the air grew colder, heavier. The forest around them seemed unnaturally silent, as if even the birds and insects feared to make a sound. Near the summit, they discovered a hidden cave entrance partially concealed by moss and vines. Inside, the walls shimmered with faint, otherworldly light, casting eerie patterns on the ground. Hyrie stepped forward cautiously, her scanner humming softly. "There's something here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something alive." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble echoed to the cavern, growing louder until it felt like the entire mountain might collapse. Then, from the shadows, a voice emerged, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in their minds. "You dare disturb my slumber?" it hissed, dripping with malice. "You are small, insignificant, yet you carry the scent of curiosity. Tell me, little ones, why have you come?" Jamin instinctively reached for his weapon, though he knew it would do little good against such a foe. "We mean no harm," he said, keeping his tone steady despite the terror clawing at his insides. "We seek answers." The voice laughed, a sound like cracking ice. "Answers? How quaint. Very well, I shall grant your wish, but beware. Knowledge comes at a price." With that, visions flooded their minds. Images of civilizations rising and falling, of beings consumed by darkness, of endless voids stretching beyond comprehension. Hyrie clutched her head, overwhelmed by the torrent of information. Dong-suk fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as memories that weren't his own surged through him. Even Jae-min staggered under the weight of it all. When the visions finally subsided, they found themselves back outside the cave, gasping for breath. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. None of them spoke as they made their way down the mountain, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, gathered around the kitchen table once more, they shared what they had seen. Hyrie described a world consumed by fire, its people screaming as the Whisperer feasted on their despair. Dong-suk recounted scenes of entire cities vanishing in an instant, leaving behind only emptiness. Jae-min, however, remained silent, his expression unreadable. "We can't let this thing loose," Hyrie said finally, breaking the silence. "If it escapes fully, it'll destroy everything." Jae-min nodded slowly. "Then we'll stop it, whatever it takes." But deep down, they all knew the task ahead was nearly impossible. The Whisperer was cunning, patient, and far more powerful than they could imagine. And worse still, it already knew they were coming. As they ascended the rugged slopes, the air grew colder, heavier. The forest around them seemed unnaturally silent, as if even the birds and insects feared to make a sound. Near the summit, they discovered a hidden cave entrance partially concealed by moss and vines. Inside, the walls shimmered with faint, otherworldly light, casting eerie patterns on the ground. Hyrie stepped forward cautiously, her scanner humming softly. "There's something here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something alive." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble echoed to the cavern, growing louder until it felt like the entire mountain might collapse. Then, from the shadows, a voice emerged, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in their minds. "You dare disturb my slumber?" it hissed, dripping with malice. "You are small, insignificant, yet you carry the scent of curiosity. Tell me, little ones, why have you come?" Jamin instinctively reached for his weapon, though he knew it would do little good against such a foe. "We mean no harm," he said, keeping his tone steady despite the terror clawing at his insides. We seek answers. The voice laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Answers? How quaint. Very well. I shall grant your wish, but beware. Knowledge comes at a price. With that, visions flooded their minds. Images of civilizations rising and falling, of beings consumed by darkness, of endless voids stretching beyond comprehension. Hyri clutched her head, overwhelmed by the torrent of information. Dong-suk fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as memories that weren't his own surged through him. Even Jae-min staggered under the weight of it all. When the visions finally subsided, they found themselves back outside the cave, gasping for breath. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. None of them spoke as they made their way down the mountain, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, gathered around the kitchen table once more, they shared what they had seen. Hyri described a world consumed by fire, its people screaming as the Whisperer feasted on their despair. Dong-suk recounted scenes of entire cities vanishing in an instant, leaving behind only emptiness. Jae-min, however, remained silent, his expression unreadable. "We can't let this thing loose," Hyri said finally, breaking the silence. "If it escapes fully, it'll destroy everything." Jae-min nodded slowly. "Then we'll stop it, whatever it takes." But deep down, they all knew the task ahead was nearly impossible. The Whisperer was cunning, patient, and far more powerful than they could imagine. And worse still, it already knew they were coming. The weight of their discovery hung heavily over Jae-min, Hyri, and Dong-suk. The visions they had experienced in the cave were etched into their minds, haunting them with every step they took. They knew now what the Whisperer truly was, a being of unimaginable power, ancient and malevolent, feeding on fear and despair to grow stronger. But knowing the truth didn't make their mission any easier. In fact, it only deepened the cracks forming between them. Hyri became obsessed with understanding the Whisperer. She spent hours locked in her room, poring over the data from the cave and replaying the fragmented messages they had decoded. Her eyes grew hollow, her movements mechanical as she chased answers that seemed just out of reach. To her, the Whisperer wasn't just a threat. It was a puzzle, a challenge to be unraveled. And the more she studied it, the more she began to believe there might be another way. What if the Whisperer wasn't purely evil? What if it offered something greater, a chance for humanity and perhaps all sentient life to evolve? Jae-min watched her spiral with growing concern. He had always been the voice of reason in the group, the one who kept him grounded when things got tough. But now, even he felt the strain. Every night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that weren't there. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, and whispers echoed faintly in his ears. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just stress, but deep down, he wondered if the Whisperer was already inside his mind, planting seeds of doubt. Dong-suk, meanwhile, was caught in the middle. He could see both sides clearly, Hyri's fascination with the Whisperer and Jae-min's determination to destroy it. But he couldn't reconcile them. His dreams grew darker, filled with images of shadowy figures reaching out to him, their voices pleading for help. Sometimes he thought he heard Hyri calling his name in those dreams, her voice soft and inviting. Other times it was Jae-min, shouting warnings he couldn't quite understand. By day he struggled to focus, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and fear. Their fragile unity shattered one evening when Hyri announced her plan. She stood in the living room, clutching her tablet like a lifeline, her face flushed with excitement. "I've figured it out," she said breathlessly. "The Whisperer isn't just a destroyer. It's a gateway and opportunity. If we can harness its power, we can elevate ourselves, transcend our limitations." Jae-min stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. "Are you serious right now? That thing is dangerous. Hyri, it'll consume us if we let it." "No, you don't understand." Hyri shot back, her voice rising. "It's not about destruction. It's about transformation. Think about it. What if this is why we were sent here? What if this is our purpose?" Dong-suk stepped forward, trying to mediate. "Hyri, maybe you're reading too much into this. We don't know enough yet to make that kind of decision." But Hyri wouldn't listen. Her eyes burned with conviction as she turned to Dong-suk. "You feel it too, don't you? The pull, the connection?" It's showing us something incredible. Why are you so afraid to follow it?" Before Dong-suk could respond, Jae-min cut in, his tone sharp and unyielding. "Because it's manipulation, Hyri. Don't you see that? This thing thrives on fear and doubt. It's using your curiosity against you." For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the room was suffocating, each word hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Hyri broke the silence, her voice cold and resolute. "Then I'll go alone." And just like that, she was gone. She slipped out the door before either of them could stop her, leaving behind an empty apartment and a gaping hole in their team. Jae-min sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples as frustration and worry war within him. Dong-suk paced back and forth, torn between anger and guilt. "We have to find her," Dong-suk said finally, breaking the silence. "If she tries to contact the Whisperer on her own, she'll get herself killed." Jae-min nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. But we need to be smart about this." She's not thinking straight. They spent the next few days retracing Hyri's steps, searching for clues about where she might have gone. Their investigation led them to an abandoned underground facility hidden beneath a remote island off South Korea's southern coast. The entrance was concealed behind thick vines and crumbling concrete, but once inside, they found evidence of recent activity. Footprints in the dust, discarded tools, and faint traces of electromagnetic energy. As they ventured deeper into the complex, they discovered a recording device lying on a table. Dong-suk picked it up cautiously, his heart pounding as he pressed play. Hyri's voice filled the room, calm but tinged with urgency. "If you're hearing this, it means I've succeeded or failed," she began. "I know you think I'm wrong, but I had to try. The Whisperer showed me things beautiful, terrifying things. It promised knowledge beyond anything we've ever known. All it asked in return was trust. If I don't come back, don't mourn me. This isn't the end, it's the beginning." The message ended abruptly, leaving the two men standing in stunned silence. Jae-min clenched his fists, struggling to contain his emotions. "She's lost," he muttered bitterly. "That thing has her completely under its control." Dong-suk shook his head, refusing to give up hope. "Not yet. There's still time to save her." Their search led them to the heart of the facility, where they found Hyri standing amidst swirling shadows. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her expression was serene, almost otherworldly. Around her, the air crackled with energy, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Hyri!" Dong-suk called out, taking a cautious step forward. "We're here to bring you back." She turned to face them, her lips curving into a small smile. "You shouldn't have come. You don't understand what's happening here. This is bigger than us, all of us." Jae-min stepped closer, his voice firm but tinged with sadness. "Hyri, whatever it's showing you, it's a lie. Don't throw everything away for this monster." For a moment, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Then she hesitated, lowering her gaze as if wrestling with conflicting thoughts. Sensing an opening, Dong-suk pulled out a talisman Unju had given him earlier, a small, glowing stone imbued with protective energy. Holding it aloft, he focused all his willpower on breaking the Whisperer's hold. A brilliant light erupted from the talisman, driving back the shadows and forcing Hyri to shield her eyes. When the light faded, she stumbled forward, gasping for breath. The glow in her eyes was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. What happened?" she whispered, looking at her teammates. Jae-min let out a sigh of relief, though his expression remained grim. "You were under its influence, but you're free now." Hyri nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "There's no time for apologies," Dong-suk interrupted gently. "We need to finish this. Together." As they regrouped, the facility began to collapse around them, shaking violently as the Whisperer fought to reclaim its hold. With no time to waste, they fled toward the surface, narrowly escaping as the entire complex crumbled behind them. Standing on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, they realized the battle was far from over. The Whisperer had been weakened, but it was still alive, and it would stop at nothing to break free. The aftermath of their escape from the underground facility left Jae-min, Hyri, and Dong-suk battered but alive. They stood on the rocky shore of the remote island, the salty breeze whipping through their hair as they caught their breath. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the jagged coastline. Behind them, the entrance of the facility lay buried beneath tons of rubble, a testament to the chaos they had narrowly survived. But despite the physical distance from the Whisperer, its presence lingered, a dark cloud pressing down on their minds. Hyrie sat on a boulder, her hands trembling as she stared at the talisman in Dong-suk's hand. It glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft, protective light that seemed to repel the oppressive weight of fear. She felt ashamed, disgusted with herself for letting the Whisperer manipulate her so easily. "I almost destroyed everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crashing waves. "What if I hadn't been able to break free?" Dong-suk knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You didn't destroy anything. We stopped it together. That's what matters." Jae-min, ever the strategist, paced along the shoreline, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. He didn't share Dong-suk's optimism. The Whisperer wasn't defeated. It was merely contained, waiting for another opportunity to strike. And next time they might not be so lucky. "We can't keep running," he said firmly, turning to face the others. "If we don't finish this now, it'll only get stronger." But how? That was the question none of them could answer. The talisman had weakened the Whisperer temporarily, but it wasn't enough to destroy it. They needed more, something powerful enough to sever its connection to Earth permanently. Yet, every lead they followed seemed to end in dead ends or danger. It was Dong-suk who suggested seeking help beyond their own knowledge. "There are legends about spirits like this," he said thoughtfully. "Stories passed down through generations. Maybe someone knows how to stop it." His words reminded Jae-min of an old tale he'd heard during his research on human mythology, a legend about a shaman named Unju, said to live in isolation atop a mist-shrouded mountain. According to the story, she possessed wisdom and tools capable of combating supernatural forces. It was a long shot, but they were out of options. With renewed determination, the trio set off for the mountains. Their journey took them through dense forests, across rushing rivers, and up treacherous cliffs. Along the way, they encountered signs of the Whisperer's growing influence. Animals behaving strangely, villagers whispering warnings about shadowy figures lurking in the woods, and entire towns abandoned without explanation. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the air itself resisted their progress. Finally, after days of grueling travel, they reached the base of the mountain, where Unju was said to reside. A thick fog enveloped the peak, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. As they began their ascent, the temperature dropped sharply, and an eerie stillness settled over the landscape. Even the wind seemed afraid to stir. At the summit, they found a small hut perched precariously on the edge of a cliff. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, and the faint sound of chanting drifted through the air. Inside, they discovered Unju, an elderly woman with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight into their souls. Her presence commanded respect, and though her body was frail, there was an undeniable strength in her voice. "You've come seeking answers," she said simply, gesturing for them to sit. "But first, you must understand what you face." Unju explained that the Whisperer was no ordinary spirit. It was a being born of fear and doubt, thriving on the darkest corners of the human psyche. Long ago, it had been imprisoned by a forgotten civilization, using ancient rituals and artifacts. Over time, however, humanity's collective anxieties had weakened the seal, allowing the Whisperer to seep back into the world. To defeat it, one needed to confront their deepest fears head-on, exposing the lies it fed on. She handed them a small charm made of polished stone, engraved with intricate symbols. "This will protect you," she said. "But remember, its power depends on your intent. If your heart wavers, even for a moment, it will fail." Grateful but wary, the team accepted the charm and prepared to leave. Before they departed, Unju gave them one final warning. Do not underestimate the Whisperer. It is clever, patient, and relentless. Trust in each other, or you will fall. Armed with new knowledge and resolve, they returned to Seoul, determined to locate the Whisperer's stronghold. Using Hyrie's data and Dong-suk's translations, they traced its energy signature to a desolate island far off the coast. The place was uninhabited, its shores littered with jagged rocks and skeletal trees twisted by harsh winds. As they approached, the air grew colder, heavier, and the whispers returned, louder this time, insistent. On the island, they found Hyree's makeshift campsite near the mouth of a cavern. Inside, the walls shimmered with the same otherworldly light they had seen before, casting grotesque shadows that danced like living things. At the center of the chamber stood Hyree, or rather, what remained of her. Her body floated above the ground, surrounded by swirling darkness, her eyes glowing unnaturally bright. "Join me," she said, her voice layered with echoes. "Together, we can ascend. Together, we can become more than we are." Jamin stepped forward, his expression hardening. "That's not you talking, Hyree. Fight it." For a moment, her gaze flickered, uncertainty breaking to the veil of control. Then, with a cry of anguish, she collapsed to the ground, clutching her head. "Help me," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I can't hold it back anymore." Dong-suk acted quickly, holding up the talisman and the charm Unju had given them. Light surged forth, driving back the shadows and forcing the whisper to retreat. Hyree gasped, her body convulsing as the entity fought to maintain its grip. The journey back to Seoul was quiet, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts. The battle on the island had drained them physically and emotionally, but they knew there was no time to rest. The whisper was weakened, yes, but it wasn't destroyed. Jae-min, Hyree, and Dong-suk understood that their next move would decide not just their fate, but the fate of Earth itself. Back in their apartment, they gathered around the kitchen table, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. Jae-min spread out maps and schematics, his sharp eyes scanning for solutions. "We need something powerful enough to disrupt the Whisperer's connection to this world," he said firmly. "Something irreversible." Hyree nodded, her voice steady despite the lingering fear in her heart. "What about our ship? Its core reactor generates massive amounts of energy. If we could modify it, maybe we could create a pulse strong enough to sever the Whisperer's hold." Dong-suk frowned, leaning forward. "That kind of energy discharge would be dangerous, not just for us, but for everyone nearby. We'd have to isolate it somehow, contain the blast." The trio worked tirelessly, pooling their knowledge and skills to devise a plan. Hyree handled the technical aspects, calculating how much power would be needed and designing modifications to the reactor. Dong-suk focused on communication, ensuring they could synchronize their efforts without interference from the Whisperer. And Jae-min took charge of logistics, mapping out the safest location to execute their plan while minimizing collateral damage. Their chosen site was Mount Baekdu, the same volcanic peak where they had first encountered the Whisperer's influence. Its remote location made it ideal for containing the pulse, and its natural energy fields might amplify their chances of success. They loaded their equipment onto their ship and set course to the mountain, knowing this trip could very well be their last. As they approached the summit, the air grew colder, heavier, as though the Whisperer sensed their presence. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, and whispers echoed faintly in their ears. But this time they were ready. Armed with the talisman, the charm from Unju, and their unwavering determination, they pressed onward. At the heart of the mountain, they found the cavern once again bathed in eerie light. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with malevolent energy. In the center of the chamber stood the Whisperer, a writhing mass of darkness, shifting and pulsating like a living void. It radiated hatred and hunger, feeding off their fear even as they prepared to fight back. "You cannot win," it hissed, its voice reverberating through their minds. "You are nothing compared to me." Jamin stepped forward, his expression unyielding. "We'll see about that." With trembling hands, Hyree activated the modified reactor, initiating the countdown for the pulse. The machine hummed to life, vibrating violently as energy surged through its circuits. Lights flickered across the control panel, warning alarms blaring in sync with the rising tension. But then, disaster struck. A sudden surge of energy destabilized the system, causing sparks to fly. The controls began malfunctioning, threatening to overload the reactor prematurely. If it detonated too soon, the pulse wouldn't be contained, and the entire region would be obliterated. "We need someone to stay behind." Hyree shouted over the chaos. To manually stabilize the system, For a moment, silence fell. Each of them knew what staying behind meant, sacrificing themselves to ensure the other's survival. Their eyes met, unspoken words passing between them. "I'll do it," Jamin said finally, his voice calm but resolute. "I've always been a planner, the one who keeps things running smoothly. This is my job." "No," Hyrie protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Jamin replied gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You two have done so much already. Let me finish this." Dong-suk clenched his fists, guilt and gratitude warring within him. "Jamin, thank you." Without waiting for further argument, Jamin turned back to the reactor, his movement precise and deliberate. He adjusted settings, rerouted power flows, and stabilized the system just enough to buy them precious seconds. Meanwhile, Hyrie and Dong-suk retreated toward the exit, their hearts heavy with grief. "Go!" Jamin called after them, his voice echoing above the din. "Don't look back." They obeyed, running as fast as they could until they reached the safety of their ship. As they lifted off, the ground below trembled violently. A blinding flash of light erupted from the mountain, engulfing the cavern in radiant energy. When the dust settled, there was no trace of the Whisperer or Jamin. Silent tears streamed down Hyrie's face as she stared out the window, clutching the talisman tightly in her hand. Dong-suk placed a comforting arm around her shoulders, unable to find words to ease the pain. Together, they watched as the mountain smoldered in the distance, a stark reminder of the sacrifice that had saved them all. When they returned home, life on Earth continued as if nothing had happened. People went about their days unaware of the cosmic battle that had unfolded, or the brave soul who had given everything to protect them. For Hyrie and Dong-suk, however, nothing would ever be the same. They carried Jamin's memory with them, honoring his courage by vowing to use their knowledge for good. The Stellar Accord hailed them as heroes, awarding them medals and accolades for their service. But neither Hyrie nor Dong-suk felt proud. Instead, they felt a profound sense of loss and responsibility. They knew they owed Jamin more than gratitude. They owed him action. Determined to honor his legacy, they dedicated their lives to studying and safeguarding humanity, ensuring that no threat like the Whisperer would ever arise again. Yet, even as they moved forward, a faint whisper lingered in the back of their minds, a reminder that the Whisperer's story was far from over. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, its essence still existed, waiting for the right moment to return. And when it did, Hyrie and Dong-suk would be ready. End of Part 5.